Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me tonight. And of course, don't forget to go and get yourself a lovely cup of hot cocoa or something very refreshing to drink. And if it's something I haven't heard about before, please let me know about it. So let's continue with part 3 of our story.
"Here we are, Sugar," said Ginger. "Isn't it the cutest little mobile home you ever did see in your entire life? You wouldn't even know it was a mobile home, would you?"
"It is rather enchanting," I admitted. Ginger pulled out a key from her purse and handed it to me.
"Now I will need you back at reception in the morning at 8:30. I would strongly advise you wear some mosquito repellent tonight. If you want to avoid being eaten alive, that is. There's plenty of insect repellent in the bathroom there. Also, don't leave any food out of doors. You don't want to attract the bears. That's why all the campers in the tents lock away their food at the refrigeration centre, which is bear-proof, I hasten to say. Now I will love you and leave you," she said, planting an affectionate kiss on my forehead, and retreating very gracefully through the trees, an ethereal figure in pink, caught up in a cloud of flying insects that swam around her in prisms of pretty soft light. She blew me a kiss and was finally gone. When Ginger had left me, I was finally alone. I entered the bird's nest with a cautious interest. Ginger had warned me it was tiny, but it was cosy, with a delightful lounge boasting a large white leather settee, with a coffee table, and a bookshelf full of fictional novels. I was already longing to read. A wood-burning stove loaded with coal and firewood, ready to set alight. The room opened out onto sliding doors that led out onto an outside deck. Then in the furthest side it branched out into a tiny kitchenette. There was a poky bedroom with a rather lumpy queen-size mattress, 2 bedside tables, and a standard-sized wardrobe, which was quite adequate, as I didn't have many clothes with me. The place was absolutely perfect for all my needs. I'd almost certainly landed on my feet against all the odds, as if finally, after a difficult tempestuous start to the day, the gods were now favourably smiling down on me. I knew if my mother could see me happily settled in, she would not be best pleased. She probably had visions of me camping out in my car, desperate to come home. If only she could see me now like a fly on the wall. She really would be wrestling with the walls in her home, with a griddle pan. She'd be so hopping mad. Because despite everything, my mother did not want to be left on her own. The hobbit size of everything at the bird's nest only added to the rather twee charm of the place. But everything was so well appointed and thought through. Easy on the eye it was. I ambled over to the kitchen and pulled out some freeze-dried camping food from the olive-green storage cupboard, which contained cans of tuna, sweet corn, packets of pasta and rice. I settled for a boil-in-the-bag chicken and mushroom casserole with rice. The refrigerator contained bottles of water, Mountain Dew, Coca-Cola, a block of American cheddar, a packet of bacon, some freshly laid eggs, milk, cream, sliced bread, a bar of milk chocolate, some strawberry jam, peanut butter, mayonnaise, and sliced deli meats. Better still, there were 3 cartons of Tom and Jerry ice cream in the freezer, cookie dough, cinnamon bun, and chocolate fudge. Did it get better than that? It seemed good old Ginger had thought of everything, and her generosity did not surprise me one single bit. I was going to like it here. I put down my plate of finished food on the Adirondack table, staring out at the scenic vistas that surrounded me. The buzzing insects were repulsed by my bug repellent, so they left me well alone, deciding to go and bug someone else for the night. The sun had retired from its fearsome showing, and was now in a subdued, mellow state of mind, as it began to blister the sky in a bedazzling kaleidoscope of colours, so it was unabashedly stained in exquisite tangerines, pinks, oranges, and golds. The trees of the woodgrove began to swing, as the wind whistled through their verdant boughs. The temperature dipped considerably, and a pleasing coolness washed over me. That was such a relief. I lay back on a cushioned sun-lounger, with a warm blanket draped over my legs. It was getting very cool, as Scarlet had warned it would. and the muggy hot air of the suffocating afternoon had all but faded away, and was but a distant memory.
My meal had been satisfyingly delicious, as the crisp mountain air, fragrant with pine, honeysuckle and lilacs, intermingled with wood smoke and barbecue meat, made everything taste absolutely wonderful. Besides, it certainly helped that I was ravenously hungry. I did fancy some cookie dough Tom and Jerry ice cream, but I felt far too lazy to go and get it. My aching, fatigued legs were way too exhausted after having stood up all day at the Pig and Whistle Visitor Centre that I couldn't even move an inch. They were like the crumbled breadcrumbs that have fallen beneath the table after a meal, that you couldn't be bothered to sweep up. I don't know how long I languished there, on that comfortable sun lounger, but I did not want to move a muscle, if I could possibly help it. I was so spent. The gold sky dissipated, spurting out black ink over the firmament, so that the curious eyes of the silvery stars peered down at me, while a luminescent half-moon poked her head through the sky, her soft prisms of pearly light subduing the darkness to a certain extent. It was so beautiful, and I did not budge, for I was parked under the starry night, like a boat in a mooring sight. My eyelids fought the battle to remain open, but were brazenly defeated and overcome by the dogged determination of my Arcadian rhythms that were intent to send me off to La-La Land as quickly as they possibly could. I fell into a blissfully deep sleep, where no mosquitoes jabbed my skin with their merciless blood-sucking lethal injections of wrath, nor did even a lonely spider crawl across my blanket. You wouldn't believe an Adirondack upholstered sun lounger would be so comfortable, but believe me, it was. Even more welcoming than my bed at home, I have to say. I had stood up all day in a sauna of heat, not commonly seen here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I just needed to let go of all my inhibitions and enjoy this restful moment. I don't know how long I was asleep for, but in my dream I heard the strange, peculiar chattering sound, as if two people were engaged in an earnest conversation that carried in its depths the imprints of worry and concern. They were speaking to each other backwards and forwards in a foreign language I did not understand, their voices crisp, articulate and clear, punctuated by much expression, which made my dream amusingly entertaining. What a curiously outlandish dream, I was thinking to myself during the dream cycle. At some point in this dream I opened my eyes, or at least I assume I did, still believing that I was fast asleep, and my detailed dream got more and more strange. Standing before me were two idiosyncratic creatures that towered at about 8 foot tall, covered in long flowing dark hair, with strapping robust bodies, ponderous shoulders, and very concerned, rather bewildered expressions on their human-like faces. One of the creatures that in my dream I knew unequivocally was a Bigfoot was tapping me with her large sausage-sized fingers, and I could hear the words in my head. "Are you all right? Gilaki kwasa?" I felt the blanket being pulled over my body. I stared at two pairs of dark eyes, scrutinizing me intently. The voices filtered in the background. "Kilakwana, ilanitoloba, ikona ninatsikali no, atika, hilakikwa, omani tilanakwa, ilokola, isani, itaki." I remember thinking that this extraordinarily colourful and vivid dream of mine was so explicit in its attention to detail, as most of my dreams in the past have been indeterminate, leaving behind a nebulous, foggy residue, and an impalpable impression that at the very best is enigmatically ambiguous, and almost always indeterminate. But this evocative dream was delineated and factualistic, which made it appear all the more comprehensible, and it was such a terribly pleasant dream that I just didn't want to let go of it. So I closed my eyes as tightly as I could, trying to hold on to that dream, like a kid hanging on to a kite, lest it should float away. I didn't want it to do that. I drifted off to sleep, awaking in the morning to the soft light of the sun glowing brightly on my face. I jumped out of my sleeping position with a start, realizing I'd failed to even return to bed, but had slept on the wooden deck all night,
on a very comfortable Adirondack chair. I could hardly believe that I'd remained under the stars like that. The fleeting memory of my lucid dream and the Bigfoots who had crossed over the threshold of my illusory state left me feeling more than slightly startled. That had not really happened, I resolutely told myself. It couldn't have happened. But if it hadn't, why did it feel so incredibly real? Why were the abstractions in my mind so detailed? Dreams were not normally like that. They were usually vague conceptualizations. Of course it wasn't real, I told myself. But somewhere, under the deep layers of my stout-hearted denial, lay buried a sobering truth that I did not want to confront. Denial can befriend us as a useful tool, when needs must, when we desperately want to abdicate facts that we choose to spurn, for they wantingly inconvenience our sense of comfort. I shook my head, persuading myself that the intoxicating mountain air had inebriated my senses so much that during the night, in REM sleep, I was seeing things that weren't actually there. I discovered from the clock on the kitchen wall that it was 7:30 in the morning. I had an hour left to kill before I returned to the visitors' centre. I realized I was completely famished, so out came the eggs and bacon. I scoffed them down hungrily, washed down with some coffee, and then I enjoyed a fresh shower that wiped away the filthy sweat from the previous day. I almost felt as if I had been completely revitalized, like a snowdrop that comes back from the dead. I put on a fresh pair of shorts that I'd pinched from my best friend's wardrobe after she'd piled on the weight from her last pregnancy, along with a bright pink t-shirt with a logo on the front that read "Smile" and "The world smiles with you." I thought Ginger would appreciate that, as she'd been on about me smiling at all the guests at the Pig and Whistle, to make them feel very welcome, so the t-shirt seemed rather appropriate, and I hoped would reinforce its positive upbeat message to all the visitors. I sat on the Adirondack chair to enjoy one more mug of coffee, and I couldn't shake the inexplicable gut-wrenching feeling that someone was watching me. I could feel curious eyes drilling into me. I was sure I'd seen a dark silhouette moving between the trees, and a pair of bright brown eyes. Was I going completely mad? What was this mountain air doing with my head? Creating and planting all kinds of ideas in my mind. Once I'd washed the dishes for my breakfast, I locked the door of the bird's nest behind me, stuffing the keys into the pocket of my shorts, and then I made my way to the Pig and Whistle site office, with the pleasant shafts of morning sun nudging my skin. Oh my word, it was such a beautiful day. It would seem the heat wave that had throttled its vindictive mean hold over the landscape had retreated. The air was significantly cooler, and the piercing, obtrusive sunlight was not so invasive, but pleasingly pleasant. When I opened the door of the site office, the bell on the top of the door jangled. I was greeted to the contemptuous scowls of the ever-so-belligerent Tessa. She poked a finger at me and said brusquely, "You are late. You were supposed to be here by 8:30. What time do you think it is now? It's 9:25. My mother does everything by the book here. She expects all her employees to be at work on time. She won't be best pleased if I tell her you were late on your very first day." "Please don't tell her. I'm so sorry," I said apologetically. "I had no idea. I genuinely thought I was early." The young girl's eyes softened. "Well, as long as you don't go spinning more yarns about being Dolly Parton or pretending to be my aunt's goddaughter Ellie, we'll do just fine together." Her eyes narrowed stubbornly. "You seem to like impersonating other people, don't you? What's wrong with being yourself?" "Maybe being myself is boring," I said. Tessa looked at me sympathetically. "You really think you're boring?" she asked me. "I suppose I do," I said. "Let's just say after meeting your mother yesterday, I think I can confidently say that I am rather boring. Your mother's like a peacock. I'm like a peahen, you could say." "Well, I don't mean to be rude, but you're very drab looking. You don't exactly look exciting. If you dyed your hair a bright colour, put a piercing in your nose and in your ears, you would be a lot more interesting and get so much more attention. I mean, look at you. You're so plebeian. Your clothes are prosaic, very stodgy. Even if the sad little uninspiring message on your t-shirt is anything to go by, you're telling us to smile. But I'm not buying it. You look miserable as hell. and I would be too if I looked like you. I mean, I can give you some pointers if you like. You don't want to scare away all our clientele with your wishy-washy appearance, do you? I don't know whether people visiting the Pig and Whistle would really care what I look like. I mean, everybody's casual around here. But you're right. I probably could do with a spot of brightening up. I mean, look at you and your mother. You put me to shame. I suppose I need to inject more colour into my monochromatic life. You're right about that, I suspect. Are you for real? Of course I'm right. How about I dye your hair bright purple? You'll look absolutely amazing, and it's so in vogue at the moment. You won't regret it, she said, her eyes looking hopeful, as if she was longing to transform me by offering me a makeover that I doubted I could refuse, even if I wanted to. I secretly thought to myself that this was the way to win the rather difficult tempestuous teenager around, was to admit that she was right. It had always worked with my mother. It was rather like applying a soothing arnica gel to an inflamed cut. It would seem being amenable to Tessa would lightly tame down her intemperate mood. Very well, I said. Do with me what you like. I suppose purple hair is better than just being a dirty blonde like I am now. Of course it's better. It's way better. Your colour, oh, it's so dowdy. If you don't mind me saying it, it's more of a dirty blonde. It seemed I had won Tess over. She became infinitely nicer to me, showing me how to operate the old-fashioned cash register, how to restock the shelves when they ran low, how to replace the orders. Now make sure we have plenty of graham crackers, marshmallows and milk chocolate at all times, she told me. People always want to make lots of s'mores by their campfires. Also keep the shelves fully stocked with insect repellent, citronella candles and sunblock. Check we have plenty of milk and ice creams, as they fly out of here faster than a witch's broomstick. People like extra-large T-shirts always, especially with the Blue Mountains on, so don't let them ever get out of stock. Let's just say, on Tessa's part, any wavering facetiousness she had left on her affronted tongue, she reserved exclusively for the customers of the Pig and Whistle. She certainly grew impatient with anyone who had the propensity to dawdle, whipping her blue pen against her diary, rolling her eyes in the back of her head. She pointed her pen at the map at the back of the leaflet and told a couple of people how to find their pitch. I told you, she chided to one customer, sounding rather exasperated, as the customer peered at the map closely. You take this long road over here, then you go past this large congregation of trees over there, then past the lake, then you turn right and then left, and your pitch is at the clearing opposite that mountain. Thank you very much for your help, the people would say gratefully. She'd smile and say, Welcome to the Pig and Whistle, and enjoy your holiday with us, and if you need anything, you know where to come. And remember, if you need any s'mores or anything for your barbecue, just come here, we've got it all. I soon realised when Tess wanted to, she could turn on the charm as fast as a light switch and become almost as delightful as her mother Ginger. An hour or so later, the bell above the door tinkled, and a woman entered the Pig and Whistle. She looked to be in her mid to late 30s, but once again, I couldn't be sure, and it would have been crass to guess her age. She pulled away the sweep of golden blonde hair from her face as she approached the desk. She looked exhausted, her clothes crumpled. Good job she wasn't on the road yesterday, I thought privately to myself, as those insufferable temperatures would have worn her to a frazzle. The name's Anita Henderson, she told us. My husband has paid in full. Could you tell me what our pitch number is? We've been driving for 7 long hours. I am so fatigued you can't believe it. The journey was insufferable. My 6 and 7-year-olds have been whining all the way, driving me completely bonkers. I'm at the end of my tether. Tess was looking in the diary under Mrs. Henderson's name. Your pitch number 15. Pitch number 15. Sorry, dear, I didn't get that. What did you say? Did you say something about an itch? Are you referring to the mosquitoes in the area? What about an itch? Tess looked annoyed with the woman. She cleared her throat. I didn't say itch. I said pitch. P-I-T-C-H. Your pitch 15, she said loudly. Isn't that funny? I could have sworn you said itch. Now where is that? Asked the woman, looking at her quizzically. How do I find pitch number 15? You must understand I've never been here before. This is my first time to the Pig and Whistle. Friends of ours recommended this place to us. My husband drove us here. He's waiting in the car, so I'll have to explain to him the map. And I've no sense of direction whatsoever. Do you think you could explain it to me like a baby? And then I might be able to understand."
"Of course I can help you," said Tess, pointing to the map at the back of the leaflet, circling the road that the woman needed to take with her pen. "We're over here at the sight office. Now you need to follow this road over here, then you turn to the right, you turn again to the left, you drive past the lake and opposite the woods. You'll find pitch number 15 over there."
"Thank you," said the woman, peering at the map. "I think that's reasonably straightforward. Hopefully I won't help my husband to lose his way. I'm very good like that."
"It is very straightforward," said Tess. "You will have to be as dumb as Dumbo the elephant if you don't find it."
"You're funny," said the woman. "I hasten to tell you I am as dumb as Dumbo the elephant." She looked at Tess with an amused look on her face, while waving the leaflet in her hand. "I better not get lost. I don't want to be Dumbo, do I? My children can play while we set the tent up. You may have genuinely saved me, my dear, from committing murder, because those children of mine are driving me completely dilly."
"You might want to get your kids a couple of ice creams," I suggested. "Ice cream should keep them busily preoccupied, so that they don't annoy you too much while you're setting up your tent. It's just an idea, of course. You don't have to agree with it."
"I can see, my dear, that you're not just a pretty face. You really have saved me from committing murder. I think an ice cream would be very appealing for my children, and for the adults as well," she said, scurrying over to the freezer and rifling through the contents. "Now, have you got any recommendations? What ice cream flavours do you think are good?"
"You'll want the vanilla and raspberry blaze," said Tess assertively.
"What about the vanilla and chocolate and peanut? I do love vanilla and chocolate," the woman said.
"Oh, you don't want that." "No, not that," said Tess. "You want the vanilla and raspberry blaze. It's the most popular ice cream we sell in the shop."
Of course it is, I thought privately. No one would dare buy any other ice cream except raspberry blaze when you're around, Tessa. The woman obviously felt pressurized to buy the raspberry and vanilla blaze ice creams and approached the counter with 4 ice creams in her hands.
"You've got 3 raspberry and vanilla blaze ice creams here," said Tess, "and 1 chocolate and nut. I'll go and change the chocolate and nut one for a raspberry blaze for you. You don't want someone in your car to end up drawing the short straw, do you? When everybody's got the raspberry and vanilla blaze, and some poor sod is stuck with a chocolate and nut, they'll feel hard done by, that's for sure. And you don't want your kids to quarrel, do you? It's always best to get everybody the same."
"I rather fancied the chocolate, the nut, and the vanilla for myself. I was going to eat it myself," said Mrs. Henderson, looking slightly put out. I could tell she really wanted the chocolate ice cream, but she did not want to offend Tessa.
"No, you don't want the chocolate and nut. It's not nice," said Tess adamantly. "Nuts are very yucky. No one in their right mind likes them. You simply must have the raspberry blaze."
And that had been that. The woman didn't dare challenge Tess, but the look in her eyes said, "But I really wanted the chocolate ice cream, and I really like nuts. I'm not a raspberry girl." The day pottered by at a very pleasant pace, and the insufferable heat of the previous day really was only a bad, distant memory. The sun today was gentle and kind, the breeze cooling, and all the visitors to the Pig and Whistle heartily glad that the weather had become so much more amenable. Ginger breezed into the Pig and Whistle a couple of times during the day, looking as glamorous as ever in an emerald green 50s styles dress, with white buttons and a slender white belt. Tess spent a lot of the day discussing with me what she intended to do with my makeover. Then the ringing sounds of the door occurred throughout the day, where customers came into the visitor centre for bookings, sometimes to buy something, or even for advice. And it had been quite a busy day. But I was genuinely beginning to enjoy myself working at the Pig and Whistle. And Tess, despite her idiosyncrasies and mulishly stubborn dominating opinions over everything, was turning out to have some redeeming qualities after all, showing me that she did have a sense of humour, even if she did keep it well hidden. It must have been 3:15 p.m. when the door of the Pig and Whistle was flung open with a forceful swing. The bell above the door began to jangle. We could see Anita Henderson running towards us. Her face looked pale and washed out, her eyes as wide as alarmed saucers. She sounded as if she was grappling to draw breath like an asthmatic, but I realized she was breathing so fast she'd been running. "I knew you'd be back, Mrs. Henderson," said Tessa cheekily. "You couldn't resist, could you? The raspberry blaze ice creams are to die for, aren't they? Let me guess, you've come for more." "I don't want any bloody raspberry blaze ice creams or whatever you call them," said Mrs. Henderson, growling fiercely at Tess. "For your information, they're not that great. By the way, I like chocolate, vanilla and nuts. I want my child. Where the hell is he?" she said, her eyes scanning the visitor centre, as if she thought we were hiding him behind the postcards, along the racks, or behind the T-shirts and windbreakers. Tessa's eyes popped open, shocked by the woman's outburst. "Sorry," she said, shrugging her shoulders. "Why would you think we'd have your child? We've been seeing people all day here, but no children have come in here except a 10-year-old girl and her mother to buy raspberry blaze ice creams, I'd like to point out." "Have you seen him? He's 5 years old. His name is Tom. Dark brown curly hair, beautiful brown eyes. I've been searching for him everywhere, but I just can't find him. I don't know where he's got to. You've got to help me find him, I'm begging you. I don't know what I'm going to do if I can't find him. Supposing something dreadful has happened to him. He could be anywhere. This place is so huge. I wouldn't even know where to begin looking." "Don't look so alarmed, Mrs. Henderson. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fine. He can't have got very far, I promise you. He's got to be somewhere around here. Kids don't vanish into thin air. The last time it happened, the kid miraculously turned up several hours later, mumbling nonsense about a teddy bear lady rescuing him. You know kids and their vibrant imaginations." "This has happened before?" asked Mrs. Henderson, looking frantic. "A child went missing." "But you did find him?" "Yes, we found him. He was just wandering around." "Well, you know what kids are like. They wander off if you're not watching them, don't they?" "I need you to help me find him now. My husband went off for a hike about a couple of hours ago. I told the kids we were going to have a sleep in the tent we pitched up. They were very tired. When I woke up, it was only my 7-year-old daughter in the tent. I asked her where Tom was. She said he went to look for Daddy, so my son could be anywhere. I mean, he doesn't even know where his father went on his trek this afternoon. This place is huge. My child could be anywhere. He could be in danger. I need your help desperately." Mrs. Henderson's face was fraught with worry. Her lips were quivering, and like any desperate mother, she was restlessly impatient to find her child, and was looking to us for answers, as if we knew the haystack where the needle was hidden. "Please, you've got to help me. I've searched everywhere. I need your help." "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Henderson, but don't worry. I'm quite sure Tom will be fine. I'm sure we will recover him. Most missing children are always found, and they're usually safe and well. That's what I heard once anyway. But we can call the police if you like." "Oh, absolutely not. You cannot do that," said Mrs. Henderson. "When the police get involved, they invariably mess everything up. They will stop me, and anybody else for that matter, looking for my own child. As you were saying, he must be around here somewhere. We don't need their intervention. Not yet, anyway. We just need as many hands on deck as we can get. Do you think you can organize that for me?" "Don't you worry, Mrs. Henderson. We'll let everybody know that we need help." Me and Tess closed the visitors' centre, turning the sign on the door to closed. Gone for 5 minutes, but we knew we would be gone for so much longer than that. It was decided that I would go into the woods, looking for the child. Tess would go around the lake. The child's mother would drive up and down the various roads. We managed to recruit over 100 people to help us search for the child. So some people spread out on foot, some scaled the woods, and others drove around the sizable property with their trucks, while 2 men were dredging the lake, something that left the mother very distressed, but everything needed to be checked out. "What if my child has drowned?" she wailed. "He can't swim. He's so terribly young."
My heart broke for Mrs. Henderson. She looked drawn out, fatigued, exhausted, and terribly afraid, as any mother would when naturally trying to recover a missing child. An elderly woman had her arm around Mrs. Henderson and was soothing her with kind words, telling her reassuringly how she had done a vanishing act as a little girl many times herself.
I was always going missing, she told Mrs. Henderson, and my parents, they had several heart attacks in my early life. One time I was gone for half a day. And do you know where they found me?
Mrs. Henderson had tears pouring down her cheeks.
No, where did they find you? I had made myself a little nest behind a couple of bushes in the backyard. That's where they found me. And I'm just saying that your son could have done something very similar. Kids do strange things, you know.
The old woman's soothing words comforted Mrs. Henderson.
Now let's be practical here, shall we? You're not going to find little Tommy. You won't find him if you're all tense and worked up and anxious and afraid. You won't be able to see him through your tears. You need to hold it together. I'll hold it together. I promise you I will. But let's get back into the car to look for him now, said Mrs. Henderson.
I decided to walk through the right-hand side of the woods in search for little Tom. Everyone was calling out Tom's name, in the hope that the child would respond to their calls.
Tom! Tom! Tommy!
The child's name could be heard being called all over the valley, as the name Tom became almost like a musical note that was trilled along with the pretty bird's song. Everyone who was available generously volunteered to help search for the child, and many agreed that Mrs. Henderson was right to avoid calling the police for the time being anyway. Everyone felt confident that we would soon find little Tom. I decided to walk past the bird's nest on the off chance that the child was there, although why I thought this God only knows. Maybe it was because the bird nest was situated in a very private spot in the woods, surrounded by wild trees, tangles of briars and rocky outcrops. When I approached the tiny pink mobile home, I discerned my eyes had to be playing tricks on me, when I observed a bundled small form lying on the sun lounger chair, which I had slept on last night. I knew instinctively it was the missing child, but to my astonishment a female Bigfoot appeared to be minding him, watching over the sleeping form. Everyone was in a panic looking for little Tom, desperately trying to find the child, and here he was in such calm serenity, being watched over by a maternal-looking Bigfoot. I knew in that moment the dream from the previous night had been real, and the creature watching over the child had watched over me during the night. But there had been two creatures the previous night. Now there was only one. The Bigfoot, on seeing me, rose to her feet. Relief appeared to wash over her face, as if my rather ambiguous vague encounter with her the previous night had made us unlikely but firm friends, and in a fleeting friendship born out of the midnight hours of the night, when I was between sleep and wakefulness, she had seen me as someone she could actually trust. I wasn't scared of her. I know I should have been, despite the fact that she towered at about 8 to 9 foot tall, but she was so benevolent towards me, and was robustly powerful in strength and stature. She had black hair with auburn highlights, and the kindest, wisest brown eyes I have ever beheld. She seemed terribly concerned about the young boy's welfare. What I do know was she was far more human than primate, and she possessed an outer-worldly intelligence about her, and an ability to read minds, for when she looked at me I felt as if she was reading my thoughts, as this was confirmed because she suddenly said,
"Kilonokwa, hisati lasiko, hamakilani kwa holopati." "But we're friends. I met you last night, don't you remember? You were sleeping over there."
I think it was her incredible benevolence and gentle demeanour that softened the blow of seeing a creature like this, so close up, so personal. My fear was pushed to one side, as my curiosity was overtaken by an immense intrigue. I will say this, I liked her at once. It sometimes took me a while to warm up to people. It had taken me several hours to decide that Tess wasn't half so bad after all. But I liked this Bigfoot instantly. She was indicating to the child and whispering to me, in her bizarre, curious language, that I could understand. I understood everything she was saying to me. "Kila kwa, hokola pisa, shakini kalanukwa." I came here. I knew you would help. The kid was running around, looking completely lost.
I brought him to you. I thought you might find his mother for me. The child is so tired, so very tired. I thought I'd let him sleep here." Once she felt relieved of her responsibility. She patted me on the back and glided through the woodgrove, giving me a nod of the head, while I stood there bemused, wondering, did that just happen? I immediately phoned Mrs. Henderson, who answered my call. "Mrs. Henderson, it's me. I've got Tommy. He's absolutely fine. He's with me at the bird's nest. He's fast asleep on the Adirondack chair here." "Oh, thank God," said the mother, sobbing with relief. "I'm coming now. Where are you exactly?" Before long, several people had gathered at the bird's nest and surrounded the sleeping child. But Mrs. Henderson was determined to wake him up. She was struggling with all kinds of emotions, from anger to annoyance to abject delight in seeing her son again. "Tom! Oh, Tom! It's you, my darling!" She threw her arms around the bewildered-looking child, who looked rather confused to see all the concerned faces gathered around him. "Where did you go, Tommy? Why did you leave the tent? You know you're not supposed to do that. I'm very disappointed in you."
"Where am I?" asked the little boy. "I didn't walk over here. What am I doing over here? I was walking in the trees."
"You walked here? You did, don't you remember?" said Mrs. Henderson. "You were trying to find your dad, and then you were so exhausted you came to sleep on this chair over here. Why would you do this, Tommy?" she said, brushing back her fringe of blonde hair from her face. "How many times have I told you not to wander off? It's dangerous. Everyone has been searching for you, and I have been worried sick. All these kind people here have been helping me look for you. I thought something terrible had happened, and this young lady here found you fast asleep, lying on her Adirondack chair. Now what do you have to say for yourself?" The boy appeared muddled.
"I don't understand it, because I didn't walk here. I know I didn't walk here. I was walking in the trees. I was going to find Daddy. I was going to find Daddy because I saw where he walked when he left the tent."
"Sweetheart, did you not hear what I said? You were found lying fast asleep here on this Adirondack chair. Now I would like you to apologize to this kind lady for what you've just done."
"Well, I'm sorry, but I don't remember."
The mother wrapped her arms around little Tommy, holding her child close to her chest. "Sweetheart, you walked here on your own. You must remember, surely."
"But I don't remember. But I do remember the big bear lady in my dream. She was so nice. I even got some berries from her, and it tasted like real berries, but I was dreaming. She was so nice. She helped me."
Mrs. Henderson ignored her son's strange remarks, as parents so often do, and waved them off as the ramblings of a child's overactive imagination. But I knew what the kid was talking about, and I held the experience very close to my heart. The long and the short of my story is that the campers all decided to get together and to have a huge party under the stars to celebrate the child's safe return. Everybody was so happy. There was a dance, plenty of barbecued food, and much laughter under the moon. I hasten to say that I worked at the Pig and Whistle for over 4 years, saw random sightings of my Bigfoot friend, and became close to both Ginger and her daughter Tessa. Ginger closed down the Pig and Whistle, but still lives on the large property with her new husband. She is happily married now, and I spend every Thanksgiving with her. My mother and me were estranged for several years, but recently we have rekindled our friendship. So maybe my father wasn't wrong about her after all. She did have some redeeming qualities. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.